welcome everyone to our sixth episode of Brag Brag. This is our series where we talk with leading AI founders, engineers, and builders about their journey building with AI. I'm Valeria Gomez Pinecone, and today we are excited to have Rich DiBona, co-founder of Describe, joining us. Hi, Rick. How are you?
Great. How are you, Valeria?
I'm doing amazing. I want to give people a little bit overview of what we're going to be chatting today. So we're going to kind of go through what Describe is doing. We are going to go deeper into how they are making complex legal information more accessible for everybody. Rich is also going to walk us through how they're using natural language processing and AI generated case law summaries to help both professionals and the general public, just like you and me, to find legal information quickly and easily. But before we begin, I really want everybody to participate in the conversation. I'm gonna release a poll. I wanna know where you are in your journey with AI. So let me just find this, let me launch it. Hopefully it's going. I don't know if okay, let me see if you guys see it. I think it's working. Sometimes these also live quizzes, I don't know, I think it's going. Let's see. But anyway, if you see it, please just let us know where in your journey you are.
Oh, there it is. I just got it.
First, one of the answers. Oh, you just got it. Perfect. Oh, so it takes
Okay.
like a little bit of time. So please let us know where in your journey you are. You're just, select the first one if you're just getting started, you're just learning and current kind of experimenting with small projects. If you are a builder, if you are just having prototypes or proof of concepts, or if you're scaling, if you already now have fully functional AI systems. I'm gonna give people a couple more seconds since it's kind of taking
It says
a
host
little
and
bit of
panelists
time.
can't vote, so I guess I can't vote.
Sorry, Rich. Yeah, we need to keep it honest. We are not voting today, but we're gonna talk about your journey anyway. So let's get a couple more seconds, no minutes. Let's kind of end the poll right now. I'm gonna share the results so you all have them. Hopefully you see them. So it seems like about 40% of you are just learning. 43% you are building already, and 18% of you are scaling your applications. So I'm pretty sure the conversation with Rich is going to be amazing today. I'm going to just stop this so I can just see my screen again. Now, finally, Rich, welcome. I'm really excited to have you here and really talk more about you and Describe.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Richard DiBona, as you see. I come to the industry from a traditional background. I was a software engineer and software engineering manager at a bunch of bigger companies and smaller companies and companies in between. And I have a lot of experience in data modeling and architecture and programming and building out sites and all that, which came in handy for what we ended up doing with Describe.
Amazing. So I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into that journey, right? Because
Sure.
it's fascinating what you have built. And I want you to take us back to the beginning, right? What was that moment of inspiration that really made you realize, you know what? We need a better, more for good, right? Kind of legal search just for everybody out there.
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. So back at the beginning of the pandemic, my wife, who's my co-founder, she's probably in the audience somewhere. She and I found ourselves in a legal situation, like a civil thing, nothing. We didn't rob a 7-Eleven or anything at gunpoint or anything like that. But there's a lot of things that could happen to the everyday person, like landlord issues or a neighbor's dog bites your kid, or you slip in a store, or and anything could happen. You lose custody of your kids and you don't know what to do. And what we found is that it's really, really hard to research these things and get information about them if you just use Google. And there are some legal search engines out there, but they're tailored towards lawyers. and big law firms, and they cost hundreds of dollars a month. So when I was struggling along with this stuff and reading raw cases, and to step back for a sec, what case law is, and that's what we're summarizing, and we'll get into that. So if you have an issue with somebody, whether you sue somebody or you get sued or criminal, you somebody, any type of criminal thing, most of those are decided right away, either by settlement or whatever. You go to court and they settle it. But some of them go to an appeal. And if I'm not a lawyer, so if I'm explaining this correctly, I think I have it largely right. So some of these things go to an appeal. And so then they'll say, like, I was judged guilty in this, but I'm really innocent for these reasons. And they'll bring it before a judge and they'll write things up. And then the judge will write these opinions, and they're called judicial opinions, and they're like 20, 30, 40 pages long. And so the judges write these out and they give a ruling on it. It's kind of like what we see in the Supreme Court now with all these rulings. These are cases that have made their way up through the levels. Then the final level is that Supreme Court. Most things don't get to that level, obviously. So these cases are all out there, and they're supposed to be free for everybody and open source, so to speak. Um, but they're really hard to access. And once you do access them, they're really hard to read. They're in legalese, and they're written by a judge, and they're written for the lawyers to read so they could see things. So I was reading these raw judicial opinions just during the pandemic, and um, it was crazy, but there wasn't a lot to do during the pandemic. And so fast forward to the end of 22, beginning of 23, when all the open AI stuff and chat GPT and everything started going crazy. I, as a programmer, I like to experiment around with new things, as probably every programmer on this call likes to do. And so one of the aspects, I didn't want to just write a chat GPT thing. So I looked into the OpenAI API, and one of the things they offered is text summarization. So what I did was I took some cases, some judicial opinions that I had been reading, and wrote a little program to suck them in and summarize them. And I was really impressed with the results. And what it ends up doing is making like cliff notes for judicial opinions. So I scaled that up and made it. Um, and sorry if I'm jumping ahead in your questions. I'm just kind of all over the place here. Do you want,
That's fine.
okay.
No, please go ahead. Yeah, I love it.
So what happened was I just started writing. I wrote this like whole system to start reading in all these judicial opinions and summarizing them. And then that's where Pinecone came in. I was trying to figure out, how can I search these things? And there wasn't a lot of documentation about anything there, or there wasn't any. I wasn't sure if it's like, is this fine tuning, or is this like, and then I found one obscure YouTube video about a guy who mentioned embedding. And so I went down and I looked into this embedding, and it looked like it fit perfectly. And then they said you need something called a vector database. And that's where I found Pinecone, probably in like February or March of 2023.
Thank you so much for kind of walking us through your experience and the reason why you decided to create Describe. Now, kind of going a little bit more into details, right? For what I have
Sure.
seen from the product, you can find, legal terms, concepts, case facts, truly like in seconds. And since you touched a little bit into like your technology stack, you kind of mentioned OpenAI, you mentioned embeddings, you also mentioned Pinecone. Maybe can you walk us through how actually everything works? You have a lot
Sure.
of information there. So kind of walk us through the journey with where you find all of this information and what do you do with it and how it goes to your product. And what really makes your product really stand out from other traditional research methods and tools, for example, like Google and
Yeah,
others out
sure.
there.
Sure. And I do want to say that I'm going to be raving about Pinecone, but am no way. I have not even received a dime in credit from them over the whole years. I paid for it all out of our own pocket and everything. It's just performed so great. So this isn't like I'm getting all these free credits. I wish I got credits along the way, but I didn't. But so the way it works is the I ran these giant documents through. I kind of did what now everybody calls RAG without realizing that it was RAG at the time, but it was just because
Mhm,
that's what seemed to work. Um, when I started uh, chopping up documents to summarize, the
mhm,
model out was DaVinci, which was the precursor to Turbo 3, or I think Turbo 3, and then 3.5 came out after that. But the context window was only 4K. And so the 4,000, that's 4,000 words. I'm everybody on here probably knows that, but in case we attracted some people who are more just watching generally or on the law side or in the learning part of the poll. So a token is a you could think of it as approximately a word. So you basically have like 4,000 words to deal with, and that has to be in what you ask of it and also the return. So I figured out that if I ask for about 3 or 4,000 characters, then it would leave room for the summary at the end. Because, like I said, both the question and the response have to fit into that 4,000 tokens, 4K tokens. So anyway, so I came up with a way to split up these judicial opinions, which are long and they're just so some of them were scanned, so they have all these weird characters in them. Some of them, the people, because it was somebody with a typewriter, it's some of the old ones, and instead of doing like
mhm.
a horizontal line like you have in Word, they would just type in, 50 dashes across, which would be 50 tokens. So I didn't want to pay for things like that. So I wrote a lot of cleansing stuff and cleaning up stuff and chunked everything up, broke it up on sentences and paragraphs and everything so that it wouldn't break in the middle. And ran that through the summarizer and then I store that in a database. I actually just have a MySQL database with good indexing on it.
Yeah.
And then I embed them in Pinecone with the ID of the record in MySQL. And then I use the metadata filtering, or I embedded it with
Mhm,
metadata in Pinecone. You could include some JSON metadata. I don't include a lot because that takes up space.
mhm.
All I did was the state that the opinion was from, so that you could, and that's on our website. You could search by state, and what that's doing is taking the keyword and adding a little filter to match up with Pinecone. And then let me see. So then the embeddings are stored in Pinecone,
Mhm.
the along with the index that points to the record in MySQL. And then when you search, it goes through and um, does the search and then matches up. And then I wrote some code to not to make it so that it doesn't return summaries from the same case. Because if you put in like a dog bit my kid and that's mentioned like 5 times in the same case, you don't want 5 results from the same case.
Mhm.
So it dedupes some of that stuff and then it displays it. And it's so fast. Like the pinecone stuff. I thought it would slow down, but there's been no right now I'm up to like the model that's like 500 and something a month, and we have like 18 million rows, and it's still as fast as if there were just 100 rows. So it's great. It's yeah, and the hard part was with the summarizing, the there's like I said, we summarized 18 million things, but when the summarizers first came out, they were super slow and it would take like 12 seconds to summarize one little chunk of text. And I calculated that it would take like 12 or 13 years to do that. So obviously we didn't have 12 or 13 years. So I wrote these like queuing systems and parallel things so I could pump in a bunch at once. And it was a nightmare, but it took like 16 months to do. And now we have all the
Well,
cases in the country summarized and searchable.
Well, there is a lot of information, right? I think I
Yeah,
was
so we could
kind of
unpack
looking
that if you
into,
want. Yeah.
it goes back to, I believe 1980 or something like that. So I can just imagine.
Yeah, and the Supreme Court ones, the federal and state. So we have like every state has an appellate and a supreme. And in New York, they're like reverse the appellate's above the supreme. Don't ask me why. And then in federal, there's district court and circuit. I mean, district court and appellate court, and then the Supreme Court, which is actually an appellate court. But our Supreme Court cases go all the way back to the beginning when it was like 1760, and there were disputes over like who has jurisdiction over a ship full of molasses in the Atlantic. Is it England or the United States, or so that's the type of stuff they were deciding, and all those are in there.
And Rich, you were kind of mentioning previously, very briefly, a little bit about your chunking, like
Yeah.
how you were chunking all of these documents, and that kind of, there were some rows. Uh, how do you decide ultimately on that chunking strategy? Do you kind of play around with different approaches? Do you decide
Hmm.
that one was best than the other? How do you make that ultimate decision to go with how you're chunking information right now?
A lot of it at first it was because of the context window, and I did experiment with
Mhm.
different sizes. And even when larger context windows came out, I experimented with bigger chunks, but I found that what happens, it actually ended up being good that the the context windows at the beginning were small, because I found that if you try to summarize too much, you can lose some fidelity in it. Like for example, if I said summarize the movie Dune 2, it's like, and put it into a paragraph, it's one thing. But if you say take every scene of Dune 2 and summarize each scene, then you kind of get a little more detail, which leads to better searches. So that's how that came about, the sizing. I mean, at first it was dictated by the technology, but then it ended up
Okay.
being, it just, we kind of lucked into that. It was the right thing to do. Because even now, I think people are finding that uh, reading in too much and trying to do too much in a context window, it might lose a little in the middle. It does the beginning and the end and loses the middle.
And you kind of mentioned also like a little bit of the technology that you're using. You were also using like a database. Also, any other kind of AI technology stack that you're using? You're an engineer, right? You have a lot of
Yeah,
experience, and probably building regular software seems a little bit different than building AI software.
sure.
So, what else are you using in your stack to make sure that uh, you know describe is working properly, right? That the information is relevant, that everything is updated, and all of that goodness. I'm pretty sure that everybody wants to hear about what else are you using.
Yeah, I found I use Redis for queuing up the things to be summarized. In that way, I don't have to I could run it overnight, and while I was sleeping, and things would still be summarizing, and these jobs would just like pull off the next thing to be summarized. And a lot of times it would crash, and I'd wake up the next morning and I have to restart everything because OpenAI would go down or something would happen. Pinecone never went down except for like a month ago. I think something happened, a programmer pushed something out or something. But other than that, Pinecone has been super reliable, and so that's never been the issue. It's been more like OpenAI will have an outage or things like that. So
Mm,
Redis has been good. Um, at one point, I tried the Microsoft Azure.
sure.
They kind of made a version of OpenAI on their own, and last
Mm,
summer, like probably a year ago, um, OpenAI itself was so backed up because everybody was using it that it was just taking forever. And the summaries, instead of like 8 to 12 seconds, were taking 16 to 20 seconds, which
mhm.
it was just way too much. Or I was getting all these messages that it was just overloaded and everything. And so I decided to try Microsoft because it was super fast. Because not as many people were using that. So I converted the code to run against the Microsoft. And what's interesting about that is some of these cases that I'm summarizing. will discuss criminal activities. And so they'll have discussions of like crime scenes or how a crime was committed. And the Microsoft thing had like this, not a censor, but like a content flag on it. And so it would kick these out. It's like, I'm not going to summarize that because you're talking about a bloody knife or something. And so I had to come up with a way to like take all the ones that Microsoft wouldn't summarize and run them back through OpenAI because OpenAI will summarize anything. And yeah, so there's been a lot of stuff, but basically it's just a relational database. I use DigitalOcean has been great too because just to spin things up. And I AWS has gotten so complicated over the years that it just takes a long time to get everything set up. And as a individual programmer, you just can't spend 20 hours a week on DevOps or something. So so DigitalOcean has been great. I mean, it's a little more than Amazon, but um they should give me credits too. But for picking them. But that's been, so we use them and we use um Pinecone, and then they can manage database, and then Redis. So that's pretty much the most of the stack.
So different pieces, right? You just need so many pieces to build software. And I want to kind of just switch the conversation a little bit because
Sure.
anybody can use Describe, right? You guys are not really charging anything right now for anybody just to go and search. So what kind of response have you received so far from your users, right? And how is this feedback is helping you decide what to do next with Describe?
Yeah, let me see. So when we first launched, we were thinking like everybody else, we should charge for this search engine because the ones that are out there are like $500-$600 a month or whatever they are per lawyer. You know, I'm sure you could get them cheaper or more expensive depending. But and so we were going to charge, and we're like, why don't we just charge $29 a month? Who wouldn't want to search for $29 a month? But the problem is as a new company, it's hard to get people to trust you. And so and it's hard to get people to sign up and do things if they don't know who you are. So we made the decision just to reduce all the friction, and we also wanted to help people. And because as I said, there's a lot of people who can't get access to the law, and we wanted this to kind of serve this whole unmet market. And so the traction really took off because of that. And even though we don't have a uh income on it, I mean, as Carl likes to say, we're not a nonprofit, we're a no profit. But but what we've done is we've built trust, and we have hundreds of people a day using it and searching, and it's really out there, and it's really exciting to see people using it and see people using it that we didn't even introduce to it. And you go out and you see people writing like videos, doing video reviews of it or using it, and it's exciting. And talking to people like you, if we had some paid thing where we had like 50 customers and I'm sitting there doing tech support all day, and we would never be where we are. So that decision to kind of get out there and get traction, and now we have some trust, and we have some inexpensive paid things that will be coming up that kind of mimic what other people are doing, a lot more expensive, but will be a lot more accessible. And now that we have the trust, people will try them. So that's been the strategy there. It requires a new way of thinking in this AI age where everything's moving so fast.
Absolutely. And yeah, especially that you want people to use it, right? And you want to really them to use it for good. Not everybody has access to legal information. It's very complicated. I mean, just starting with the concepts, the words, it's just not everybody has that level of understanding. So you're making it easier for everybody. So I thank you on behalf of everybody because, in some way or another, I mean, anybody at any point in time, they need just figure out an answer, right? And if you can access, so it just becomes how can you help with this? You is this your first startup? Like the first like that you're building your first startup from the ground up, or do you have other tries before?
I had one back a few years ago, and I might be dating myself, but I had written this thing for large file sharing, and I didn't realize that on the other side of the country, somebody was writing something called Dropbox. And so I put this thing out there, and people were like, great. And then Dropbox released something that did the same thing. So it validated that it was a good idea, but it wasn't I obviously didn't have the type of funding or anything they did. So, but yeah, that was a good experience to get something end to end and get it out there. And then there was another one
So
with a social network that would be not nasty and all that and let you post kind of like a new version of Tumblr. But again, it all these things are good experience for writing and getting things end to end. And it's really important to write these things so that when you do come up with a good idea like this one that we're doing now, like you have the skills and you're ready to kind of pounce on it.
well, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of experience, and also you've kind of faced your fair kind of share of challenges along the way, but kind of focusing on describe. What were some of those difficult moments that you faced while bringing describe to life? It was it just like a lot of experimenting, or any unexpected roadblocks that kept you at night, maybe? Especially for those here in the audience that are building their own company or building, AI applications too.
Hmm. Yeah, I would say for us, I mean, we took on the task of just summarizing so much data, and we didn't want to summarize it on request. We decided to summarize it so that's why our search is so fast, because it's not doing any summarization after you search. It's already pre-summarized and in Pinecone. And so that was super challenging, just the scale of it and the fact that there wasn't a lot of documentation at the time. I mean, now everything's kind of
Mm.
easy and out there, and the road has been like the path has been macheted and everything, and people could walk down the path. And but like I said in the beginning, there wasn't like I had no idea that this embedding existed, and till I was like hunting around and how do you do this? And then the roadblock with the Microsoft thing where suddenly things are
Yes.
kicking out and you're like, what do I do? And how do I make this take 12 months instead of 12 years with the summarizing? How do you deal with this type of data in a relational database? Will Pinecone handle this? Well, we've had even recently, there's when you give something out for free, obviously there's going to be people who aren't as nice as you and I who will try to go in and take your data and things like that. So you have to put in stuff like that into the back end to block those types of
To
requests.
protect
And
it.
so it's just a lot of challenges that I'm sure most of the people on this call have dealt with. It's just there's a lot more pressure when you're sitting there on the fly trying to get a startup and going and you have live customers.
And now taking all of these challenges, right, and all your experiences, and what are the future plans for Describe? Any new expansions, any new products, anything that you're excited to share with us today, or where is kind of your head going, knowing that everything is evolving so fast in AI?
Yeah. Technically, what I'd like to do is Pinecone has the serverless thing, which I haven't tried yet. But what I want to
Mhm.
do is I'm using the Ada 2 embedding, which is
Mhm.
um, whatever, 15 months old now. And it does work really well, but I'm always afraid that OpenAI will be like, we're deprecating this, which will render things, you know, it could kill things. So what I'm going to do is try to embed using some of the newer models. Like they have like a text embedding large or something where you could specify the number of vectors and then try to put that into the serverless side and see if how that'll work if that gives better results. So I'll try that in a small amount and compare back and forth and see if it actually performs better or not. We have some paid ideas, like I said, where we'll charge a small amount to do some of the things that some of the big companies are charging for. Um, because there's a lot of people out there who don't have access to these tools, as we've been talking about, and there's people who represent those people. In this country, you get a lawyer for criminal, but you don't get a lawyer for civil. So if you're in civil, you're kind of on your own. And there are some firms out there and people who are trying to do great work trying to help those people, but they can't do it all. And anything we could do to help them save time while they're, or, cut their costs a bit. So those are some of the goals coming up.
And I know you're very involved in your kind of industry, in your field, and also with the experience of going through all of this information from all the law cases, and I want to kind of know a little bit your perspective on the broader legal industry. And do you see any changes now with AI in the long term for the legal landscape? Way to make it more accessible for people. You mentioned, now people are not getting like a civil lawyer for a civil case. Do you think it's going to make it more accessible and really more for good for the people?
Yeah, yeah. So we're in now that I'm involved in legal tech,
Mm-hmm.
which I only got involved in legal tech like 15 months ago, and it's a great industry. Everybody's so nice and so helpful. And but that's what all the stuff I see on LinkedIn is around legal tech now because it knows what I like. And I think a lot of the concern is the lawyers are trying to figure out how this fits into their job. Like there's been some lawyers who have asked ChatGPT to draft briefs for them and then they get in trouble. I'm sure you see that in the news
I have
because
seen it,
it'll
yeah.
like make stuff up. Like it wants to
The
please
app,
you and
yeah.
it'll make up a case. And then um so there's a lot of how does this fit into our job? How does this affect our billing? Like if I could do something now put more quickly, how does this affect the billable hour for attorneys? Um, People like Cara and I, and there's a firm called the Justice Technology Association that we're involved with, are trying to do more of the access to justice thing and help have AI do good things because if AI, if only like the richest people in this industry, like let's say that the people who own these super expensive search engines, if they're the only people who are pushing forward with the AI, then their clients are the only ones who will get the benefit and it'll widen the gap. And then the people who don't have any representation or any access will be even worse off. So if you're fighting against some giant firm, they will just have all the it just makes it an even more it's like one of those gladiator battles where the guy's wearing armor, has all the weapons, and you're out there
Yes.
just in your
Uh,
shorts, you know? So, it's, there's a lot of that in legal tech, but there's a lot of companies trying to solve issues and make things more efficient. There's not as many trying to do things like we're doing, like giving it away for free, and maybe we're crazy, but again, it's hopefully there's a larger reward for doing things like that and helping people.
And your journey really in studying and growing Scribe is truly impressive, Rich. I'm really happy that we have this conversation today. And for those inspiring, builders and, entrepreneurs here in the audience, we have 40% that are just, starting to build with AI, they're learning. We have 44% that they are kind of have some prototypes. Any piece of advice that you have for them that you say, I wish I knew that when I started 16 months ago building the company?
Yeah, I would say, um, as a programmer, there can be a tendency to kind of get paralyzed by reading about things and going on Reddit and reading all these threads about things, and instead of just trying to do something, like just instead of like reading all about it, just go on one night and open up your IDE and open up an API documentation and try making some calls and see what you get back and try just do the thing. I try to I'm not online as much. I mean, I leave that to Kara because it could be very distracting and you see people like, "Oh, this is bad or that's bad or that's bad." Like it could kind of ruin your vibe. So I just like to kind of get things done and do things rather than think about them. And also, it's good to have a bit of naivety. Like if I had read about this industry, it might have been too scary to get into it. Like, oh, there's players and they own the whole market and there's no room. And now we've kind of wedged out a way and made our own little share of it. So it definitely can be done. And I think it's just a matter of doing stuff and sitting down and doing it rather than um, you know, reading about it or talking about it. That's just my 2 cents. Does that answer the
That's
question? Or
that's kind that's yes, and that's one of the like recurring themes or tips just from other conversations that I have in the past. Just sort of, I think nowadays the barrier of entry is very low. There's a lot of things that you can do, and you just really want to having just you want to do something, just do it.
yeah,
So just do it, experiment. You will learn a lot from that
sign up for
journey.
a Pinecone account.
Or anything else that will help you, but for sure, yes. Anything that there's so many tools out there. It's just unbelievable how like the landscape is just growing, and there is always something new. um, that's why we are also having these conversations to kind of give our audience a little bit of visibility of what others are using, because it's just so much. It's like, what do you use this, how do you use that? It's just at the end of the day, experiment.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, that's I mentioned that I don't read online. I read enough to kind of keep up, but I don't want to get overwhelmed either. Like I get emails about new models every day and new this and new that and you can really go down these rabbit holes of like, oh, should I change to this or should I change to that or should I do this or that? And it's like um it there's a time for all that, but as long as um like our thing's working really well, so there would be no reason to just kind of change things just for the sake of it, you know?
That's also a good point. If it's working, stick to it. You don't have to go try the next shiny thing to see. Maybe in your free
You
time.
might break what you're doing.
Maybe in your free time with something else. Rich, we have a few questions and we are almost at time. What about we
Sure.
spend some time kind of going through them? Let's
Sure.
do it. I'm gonna go from the top, no in particular order, but just the ones we just start getting at the beginning. So Stanley is asking, how do you evaluate the effectiveness of your RAG generated summaries? Do you rely on human evaluation or some automated ways?
Yeah. So the way we did it at first was I would summarize it was like a manual process, the same way you might
Mhm.
um QA something at a assembly line or something where you the first like 500 I did, I read every single one and compared it to the original had and then after that 500 I would pick off every like fifth one or as things were going by on the screen summarizing I'd pick one random ones out and do like quality assurance and read them. And then we had friends that we knew that were attorneys, and Kara's uncle is an attorney, and he was incredibly helpful early on in kind of reading through some of these things and helping us with advice. And so there was human verification. And also now that we've had like hundreds of them, we've had attorneys running through their own cases that they were involved with. And so it's really a matter of like no one has told us that they're wrong rather than verifying that they're, so we verify that they're right and we still verify and but it's more of a manual and human process. And I see that there's a service like that he
Tonic.
put in the thing. So copy that link. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Awesome. And I was going to say, yeah, come on, share that with us. So let's check it out. If you want to use something to kind of validate the effectiveness, here you can use Tourniquet. That's pretty cool. Thank you, Amal. And then Kemal has a question too. So he wants to know, what do you think of relying on third-party service providers for parsing function process instead of trying to create your own? He says that he used unstructured that at all.
Yeah. Does he mean, does he mean like, for chunking up the summaries? Let me see. For parsing function process, I use like different Python libraries. Like there's one called Beautiful Soup, which does a lot of like, it's a weird name, but it'll like interpret where sentences are, and you could do different things with it. Actually, I use that for the original format. I didn't use that for splitting up, but there's these libraries that people have written a whole bunch of stuff in Python for all different cases, and that's another one. Kamal is giving a lot of helpful links today, so I will take a look at that also. Kamal gets
love it. I love
okay.
how the community weighs in. Love
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Love it. Make it interactive. Okay, we have one more from Yilmaz. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce your name right. Do you have experience with graph racks?
No, I actually don't. So I will make an exception and read about that. I am filling up a thing with things to look up. Thank you for that, Yilmaz. No, I don't have experience with that.
There is so much. I mean, I was reading the other day that, we started with RAG. Nobody knew what RAG was like last year. Right now, there's like, I believe like 6 different type of RAGs. So it keeps evolving.
Yeah, as I said, I didn't even know. Like last summer, I think, I read like people started talking about RAG systems or something. And I was like, oh wow, that sounds exactly like what we're doing. So I just kind of happened upon it, and I don't know if I'm doing it by the way the white papers say or textbook, but I did it the way that from a data architecture and data modeling and standpoint in a traditional approach of how you would attack this type of problem. And I think I ended up pretty close, but I'm sure there's some more efficient ways that if I was doing it again, that maybe would go a little bit differently. Okay, let me
for
see.
sure. I'm going to skip down because I think the person was trying to understand the limitations in the summaries provided based on the
Yeah, I think
jurisdictions.
yeah. So the summaries, they're everything's divided by state, and then it seems like state and jurisdiction are somewhat interchangeable. And again, if you're a lawyer, forgive me if I got that wrong, but it seems like when people talk about jurisdictions, they talk about like states or state courts. And so we do have everything divided up by that. And so you could search and get back the results across all states, and then you can narrow down using Pinecone metadata filters to see specific states. So
And
that's
you're
where we
using,
have it. And and given that legal concepts and standards could vary significantly between, I think it's up to the person. We're just giving legal information. We're not giving advice. So we're not saying like your next step is to go fill out form A, B, and C and do this. We present it, and then it's up to you to read it. So if you're an attorney, you would go and read these summaries, and then we give access to the original opinion right on the page. So then you would read the original opinion, then you would decide what to do with it. But I think our goal is just to surface these things a lot easier and faster. So I hope that answers Anonymous's question.
yeah, and I think that she added a clarification. And yes, I think that was like the lack of the function, but I think we covered that up. So I'm going to just say we answer it. And say down here so I don't get confused. And we have another one from Carlos. Carlos would like to know, are you mostly using LLM's API, as you mentioned with OpenAI, or are you using a framework like launching?
Yeah, we're doing it completely just with APIs. I don't even use the libraries. I notice,
Mhm.
and they're probably better now, but at first they were some of the cause of the issue because even Pinecone, sorry to say, like they were so early, like the Python libraries, that they would sometimes crash or sometimes, and now I'm sure they've matured, but what I did was I used like the equivalent of like the REST call. So I just use like curl from Python and call things directly.
Hopefully that answered your question, Carlos. Let us know. I'm gonna go here, Cara. I'm gonna ask the question later, so I'm gonna skip yours, and I'm gonna go to the other ones. Sean also wants to know, how do you address the issue of low recall precision in the retrieval process?
The issue of recall, precision in the retrieval process. Oh, so Pinecone, and I hope send this answers, I'll answer it the best I'm interpreting this, but sometimes Pinecone will go, it'll dig as far as if you tell it you want 100 results, it'll try to find 100 results, even if it has to go lower, like to a lower match score. And so we get those match scores back, and I have it so you could order by either highest match score or most recent. And if you score by most recent, you might get lower matches. But the good thing about that in legal is what we found, like let's say you type in slipped on ice outside of a store, who's liable or something. Um you type that in, and as you uh you'll get ones about ice as a super high relevance, but then as you go down, it'll find ones about slipped on loose gravel or slipped on new pavement or slipped on a roller skate or slipped on a banana peel or whatever. And so sometimes the ones that are lower relevance are actually useful in this particular case because it's it's the power of that semantic search that AI has and that Pinecone helps us access with the vector matching, that where you don't have to know the exact keyword. Like in traditional search engines, you'd have to type in loose gravel, then you'd have to type in new pavement, then you'd have to type in banana peel, and you would have to hope for the best that you got them all. Where in this, you type in one thing, like about a pet, and you'll get cat, dog, frog, snake, rabbit, all the relevance, you know? So I don't know about if that's what you mean by precision, but we have the Ada 2 has 1536 vectors, I think it is, and that's what we use in pine cones, and it seems to be working fine.
Okay,
Orthogonal
okay, let us
clustering.
know.
Oh,
Yeah, I think Shiraz is kind of giving a little bit of information here. Somebody wants to test that. So there is the
okay. I'll
URL if somebody
I'll
wants
copy that
to
URL.
also look into this a little bit more. Thank you, Shiraz, for sharing this. I'm
We're
gonna
not really chunking on anything specific other than like paragraphs and sentences we don't break in the middle, because we found that because it you don't really lose a lot because they're all parts of the same case. And so if you miss it in one, it'll show up in the next summary, if that makes sense. And then, you can put them all together and read them all. We chunk them all together. And then how do you recommend
yeah, we have
processing documents at scale for a RAG, for example, over 500,000 PDFs? Yeah, you're going to have to get into some type of queuing. Like I said, look into Redis. That I used the monthly Redis was the cheapest thing, was only like $6 or $7 a month, because you get like 100 MB, but that's plenty to hold like 400,000 in your queue. So you could almost yeah, look into something like Redis for queuing things up and then processing. Redis
perfect. I'm
Cloud,
gonna
I
say
think I use.
Redis Cloud. Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna say that we answered that one. And we have last question of the day. Shantanu says, thank you for taking the time for this conversation. They would like to know if you see a hallucination, 0-day vulnerability in one query that is in production, do you use a framework or rules to override LM's outputs?
Yeah, we're not using LLM at runtime. Like all of the LLM work was done up front. And so that's the good thing is our OpenAI build, now that everything's summarized, is very low. It's just the embedding and new cases that come in. And the Pinecone is a set rate for us. I mean, once we switch to serverless, that might change. And the DigitalOcean hosting is a set rate. So um, we don't worry about the LLM stuff, but if I do see things where like that, like any warnings, then what I'll do is I'll change stuff for new cases that we summarize. I hope that answers. Reach out, anybody wants to reach out on LinkedIn or has any further questions, that's fine.
Awesome. So, it has been great talking to you today, Rich. Thank you so much for all the insights, for taking the time to answer all these questions. Now I'm going to ask Kara's question here. If people want to get in touch with you to learn more, to get involved, can they reach you out via email, LinkedIn, social? Can you share any of those with us?
Yeah, so we are on, if you search for describe with a Y, you'll find us on Google. I think we're describe.ai on LinkedIn and um, YouTube and things like that. We I'm on there under my name, Kara's on there. Um, and I would encourage everybody to go and try it. Like it's literally just a search box like on Google. So you could just go onto the homepage and type and you don't have to sign up. You don't have to do anything. There's no um tracking you or anything. There's no weird ads. There's nothing like that. And just try it and you could see as a programmer what the end result could be for some of this stuff that you summarize and how fast it could be when you use Pinecone.
Yeah, awesome. Kara, share the LinkedIn. And also, if you got all our emails promoting the conversation, it was great. You can just click describe and it just takes you right away to the website. So that's another way that you can just find it in your inbox if you cannot take notes right now. So thank you so much for listening today. Thank you so much, Rich. This was amazing. I would love to have you back again. I will love, this conversation was amazing. We actually went 8 minutes more, but I love doing this to kind of educate. So I really appreciate your time.
Great. I'll experiment with the new thing you guys emailed about today with the text processing if I get through the wait list, and then we could come back on and talk about that.
Let's do it. We will be here again on July 16 for our next Red conversation with Luis Morales, VP of Engineering at Help Scout. Let me share the link if you would like to join us. Very similar kind of format. Hope you can join us. July 16th, yes.
Oh yeah.
June. Oh my God. Yeah, I know. That's July 16th.
Yeah.
I cannot believe it's already June. I just cannot believe it. But yeah, July 16th. Please just forget my brain. I just cannot believe I don't want to be in the next half of the year. It's gonna really fly really, really fast. Okie dokie. And thanks again for joining us, and I hope to see you again very soon. Thank you. Bye, Rich.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.